Now that we've got a good handle on navigating our footage and finding the moments that we want to include, let's now begin the editing process. And in this movie, we'll start laying in our shots as we practice two types of edits in Final Cut: append and insert edits. Now, in the previous movie, we marked several sound bites that we'd like to use, and I've added several more, which you can find in the 3.2 keyword collection. So Chapter 3 and 3.2, and so everything you need will be contained within here. So I also, in the 3.2 keyword collection, have a blank project, which is what we're going to start with. So I'm going to double-click to load that. Just to show you how to create a project from scratch, though, I'm going to come up to File, New, and Project, or Command N. And when you do that, a dialog box appears asking you the properties of the project that you want to create. So it's here that you name the project, determine the event that you want it to live in. You can set the starting time code, and then probably most importantly, you set the video and audio properties. By default, as you see here, the video settings will take on the characteristics of the first clip that you edit into the project. And for now, that's what we're going to choose. However, I just want to mention that if you do this, you should edit your first shot with a clip that is representative of most of your media. So in other words, if your entire program was shot in 1920 by 1080 HD at 24 frames per second, you wouldn't want to edit your first shot into the sequence as a 720 by 486 SD clip at 30 frames per second, because then that clip would determine your project properties. So just keep that in mind. If you want to set up custom settings, you can click down here, and there are lots of drop-downs to determine exactly the type of properties that you want. But we want to do automatic settings, and I've actually already set up the project for us anyway, so I'll go ahead and cancel here. So I'm going to come down to my clips, and let's start editing. Before we do, though, I just want to briefly pause to explain the context of what we'll be working in. We're editing a promotional piece about Project Reload. And again, if you missed it from the introduction chapter, Project Reload is a nonprofit that teams up military vets and successful corporate executives on some backroad adventure trips where the vets can really show their stuff and their leadership styles. And the intention is to educate the business community on the value of hiring veterans. So we need to tell this story. And we'll do that by starting with some of the shots that I have in here. So make sure that you have loaded your blank Insert Append Begin project. You can see that it's loaded right here. And I'm going to start with Mike. And we already marked some of his shots in the previous movie. And so I want to start with where he talks about the statistic for nonprofit organizations in the U.S. If I hadn't already marked my in and out points, then I would need to do that now. But I was already very careful to do that, so I can just select this clip. And there are quite a few ways to get this into the timeline, but we'll begin with probably the most intuitive, which is to simply drag it down. Okay, we've started our project. Right now, I am looking at a small clip in the timeline. Remember, I can always zoom in using my Command++, repeatedly pressing that. You zoom out by pressing Command-. But if I wanted to do a zoom to fit, which will fit this within the timeline view, that is Shift-Z. And I'll go ahead and play this.
So in the United States right now, there's a little over 37,000 not-for-profit organizations dedicated to military causes. So in the United States right now.
And again, it loops because I have loop playback on. Again, that's in the View menu, Playback, Loop Playback, or Command-L. If that bothers you, you can turn that off. So I'm going to go to the end here, and I next want to go into Mike again, where he talks about what most of these nonprofits do. So I could drag and drop just like I did before, and it comes right down. However, I want to try to impart the importance of keyboard shortcuts early on, because the more you learn to edit with the keyboard, the less you'll rely on clicking and dragging, and the faster and more efficient you'll be. So let me undo that edit, Command-Z, and now I'm going to make sure that this is selected, and I'm going to do the same thing by using the Append edit with the keyboard shortcut E or this on-screen button right here. So I'm just going to select the clip and press E, and I'll select the timeline and press Shift-Z to zoom to fit. So as you can see, I've added one clip after another. Now in that situation, I did have my playhead at the end, but an append edit actually always sends the clip to the end, no matter where the playhead is. So let's say that I'm down in the timeline reviewing my material, and my playhead is just hanging out right in the middle of my sequence. Then I'm up here in my browser looking at some shots, and I want to make my next edit. Specifically, I have Joe here. I've already marked this perfectly, so we don't need to mark my in and out point. And I want to go ahead and bring this down. So even though my playhead is just hanging out in the middle of my sequence, I'll just select this and press E, and it comes in at the end. So I'll press Shift-Z, and there we go. Let's go ahead and play through these next two clips.
And one thing that's common in everyone that we've seen is that they're all trying to do something for the veterans. They're trying to maybe job placement, resume writing, skill building of some type of service that they're offering to the veterans.
There's so many veterans out there. If you took each veteran individually and helped them get a job, okay, here, we're going to help you get a job. We've got your resume ready. Good. Now let's move on to the next one, to the next one. We have thousands of veterans. That process doesn't scale. What scales is when you get people at the top of the organization that said, this is what we're going to do.
So hopefully that gives you a little context with where we're at. I'm going to add another shot to the end. Again, it doesn't matter where my playhead is because I'll just do an append edit. I have Casey here, and just to give you a little practice on marking in and out points for our source material, I didn't subclip this clip like I did the others, but I did place a marker where I want the soundbite to begin. So let's do the same thing, but we'll go ahead and mark our in and out and bring it down. I'll press I to mark an in.
Now it's going to be that trickle-down effect, and it's going to start, those executives are going to go to their HR and say, again, we need to relook at the way we hire veterans. We need to bring more veterans into our leadership positions.
And I press K to pause, and I'll press O to mark an out. And now I'll press E to make an append edit. And so my orange bar here shows me the section that I've edited into my sequence, whereas because I brought the entire clip down on these, the orange bar covers everything. So adding one shot after another like this is pretty straightforward, but it isn't always practical. Many times you need to edit shots non-linearly. So let's say that I decide that in between Joe and Casey, I want to come back to Mike to explain what Project Relo's mission is. And I have that clip right here. Again, I've marked it perfectly, so we don't need to mark our in and out points. So just as before, I could drag this down, and if I sort of pause in between these two clips, you can see that it opens up for me, and I can drop it in. And drag and drop editing is fine, but as you'll hear me say many times, keyboard methods are usually faster, so we'll explore both, but I will always come back to the keyboard. So with that said, let me undo that, Command-Z, and I'm going to get set up for the same type of edit, but this time with the keyboard. I just need to make sure to put the playhead exactly in between these two shots. I have snapping enabled. Again, your snapping command is over here, or keyboard shortcut N, so it does magnetize to my edit points. If I disabled snapping, you would see that it's going to be a lot harder to get that lined up. But I'll enable snapping, and it very easily magnetizes to that position. Another way to do that is to use your up and down arrow keys like so. So I've selected my shot. Instead of pressing E to append, I'm going to make an insert edit. It's this on-screen button right here, or the W key. So I'll just select it and press W. Easy enough. An insert edit always adds a clip at the location of the playhead. I'll go ahead and play through Joe, over Mike, and into Casey.
That said, this is what we're going to do.
What Project Relo is trying to do is we're trying to educate the business community on the value of hiring veterans, which is in the same vein, but it's a 180-degree different type of view that we're bringing.
Now it's going to be that trickle-down effect, and it's going to...
So we're starting to see this narrative come together. Now let me undo that, Command-Z, and let's say that I didn't get my playhead right in between these clips. I'm just going to put it in the middle of Joe's shot, and again, I'll press W. And you can see that it literally split Joe's shot in two. Now, sometimes you may want to break up a clip like this, but definitely not in this case. So I'll undo that and then press my down arrow key to get in between those shots and press W, and I've made my edit. And I'll press Shift-Z to zoom to fit. Now, let's say that I decided to start this entire sequence with several military shots to introduce the notion of hardworking vets. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the beginning of my sequence, which I can drag, or remember your home key is always available to you. So I can just press home, and I'm at the beginning. And I have some of those shots right here. So I just want to show you how you can use the keyboard to very quickly get shots down. So I'm just going to mark an in and an out and press W. And here, in, out, W, in, out, W. All right, so as you can see, the keyboard can get it done pretty fast. If you ever need to make some small trims, and again, we are going to go into an entire chapter on trimming in chapter 4, but I'll just show you the most basic type of trim right now, and that's called the ripple trim. Let's say that I thought this shot was a little bit too long. I can just grab the edge and drag. That is the manual way of doing it. If I wanted to use the keyboard, I would just select the edge, and then I can press comma to trim to the left, or period to trim to the right, and we're trimming one frame at a time. Again, we'll learn much more later, but that's just a little primer for now. So we can keep going, but as you can see, by inserting and appending your shots, you can very easily add your material, one shot at a time, in any order that you want.